This is a Squiz podcast. We're your shortcut to being informed. The weekly wrap is the week in news and what's coming up. I'm Kate Watson.
And I'm Claire Kimball.
Donald Trump's inauguration has so many facets to it, so we'll spend a bit of time there today, Claire.
We're just prepping you for that. We're definitely spending a bit of time on that. We're also going to get into what happened with that ceasefire between Israel and Hamas in Gaza this week, antisemitism in Australia as well, and also some political polling.
We don't tend to focus on polling, but it was notable this week, and also because we have our interview with Prime Minister Anthony Albanese in your feed ready to listen to, so it gives a bit of context to that conversation as well.
It does. What's coming up? We've got tennis, cricket and school.
End of school holidays for some states and territories. Some are still holding on.
I can hear some cheering in the background there somewhere.
Before we get into it, this episode is brought to you by HubSpot. With HubSpot, marketing has never been easier. Create content fast, get better leads, and nail your reporting all in one place. Visit HubSpot.com/marketers to see how companies like yours are generating 110% more leads in just 12 months. One of the benefits of building a media company is we get to put our classifieds at the very top of our podcast, Claire. We're hiring.
We are hiring. We've got a couple of job ads to run you through. So, look, we just really want you to clock this because you'll have people in your networks, if not you yourself, who might be interested in these. First cab off the rank, we've got a chief organiser role.
That is what we're calling it because we have a lot of things to organise, including, I guess, the way that we issue our advertising. So the way that our advertising runs, the programs that we use, how it's all delivered to you. So that's one part of the job. But then we've got a whole heap of other stuff that's got to be organised. And we just want someone who loves the squiz and considers themselves really, really organised. Did we say organised enough?
Organised, attention to detail. If that's you, give us a shout. We've got a couple of then content production related roles as well. We need an audio-visual editor and we need an editorial assistant.
Yeah, so just on the first one, that is someone to edit our podcast, someone with experience editing audio. But we're keen to hear from, obviously, a wide range of people. So if that is a skill that you have, please get in touch. The editorial assistant job is a bit of a funny one.
So some listeners might have seen in the financial review this week that we're partnering with Joe Aston on producing and commercialising his new media business, which is called Rampart. It's been a bit of a week, just a side note for us. The person that we're looking for will work with Joe and with the Squiz on a range of tasks. So everything from, for example, helping him research for his articles, for the posts that he will do for Rampart, and also on the technical side of actually producing it, so putting his newsletters out. It's such a unique opportunity for someone who is a graduate or a year or two into their careers. If you're interested in media, business, finance, perhaps a law graduate, someone super smart to really take this opportunity on.
If you don't know who Joe Aston is or what any of that's about, that's okay. But we will put a link to that AFR piece in your show notes so you can have a read because it's a big part of what we'll be doing this year, of course. I think that's enough.
Admin.
Is that enough admin?
Yep, housekeeping, done.
The news is big. The inauguration was huge. As I said, we're going to spend a bit of time with it this week because I'm getting a lot of texts from people saying, whoa, what happened this week? So here we go. Let's do it chronologically, I think. At the start of the week, Joe Biden, in the dying hours of his presidency, issued a handful of pardons, Claire.
Yeah, and we've talked about pardons before, but essentially they're just a way for a president happened many, many times in the past, can basically give people a free pass on whatever conviction might have happened. The Biden's ones, though, that he issued right at the end of his presidency were a little bit different because they're preemptive. We're talking about people who haven't been convicted of anything. So essentially he's giving them a free pass, anticipating that the Trump administration might come after them. He's worried about that. So they include his 3 siblings, retired General Mark Miley, also Dr. Anthony Fauci, members as well and staff of that House committee that investigated the Capitol building riots from 2021, police officers that testified before that committee as well. We'll come back to the Capitol riots in a moment, but the one pardon out of all of that really made big headlines was Fauci.
Yeah, so to who he is, he was the director of, this is a long one, the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases at the National Institutes of Health for nearly 40 years, including during Trump's first administration. He later served as Biden's chief medical advisor. He retired in 2022. He helped coordinate the nation's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. He was widely criticised by Trump and others for the approach. As you said, the interesting thing about these pardons is that Biden had to explain he doesn't actually think these people are guilty of anything. He just wants them protected. It's a really broad use of the pardon function, I guess.
That's why it's very, very notable, just to really underline that point. These people have not been convicted of anything.
Or even investigated.
Or even investigated in certain cases, that's for sure. So, yeah, really interesting one.
Then we get to the inauguration itself. This is where Trump is officially sworn in as president again. Of course, he's done this before. Last week, we flagged the freezing conditions. They existed.
Yeah, they really did. That was a good shout out, I think, because it was the prelude to what unfolded with the inauguration. Normally it's that big outdoor event. Remember last time Donald Trump talked about the millions of people who came and saw that, and there was the whole contest about how many millions actually did, or was it thousands? This time it was inside, so it was in the Capitol building. Much smaller crowd, of course, because that rotunda within that building can only have so many people. It was only a few hundred.
Few technical difficulties. I think the first thing I saw about the inauguration was Carrie Underwood, a very big country singer in the US, having to sing a cappella because the backing vocals didn't work or something. So it was a few technical. I like to know that even the best in the world, surely the best event organisers have problems. That's really good to know.
Well, imagine being the event organiser and you get that call like 3 days before saying this mega outdoor event is inside. Okay.
Okay. So anyway, as you say, much smaller crowds, Trump's family, major political leaders were all there. A handful of billionaires got seats as well. So many memes, Claire.
If you weren't paying much attention to the news this week, it really was just a relentless onslaught of memes.
Billionaires mingling with past presidents, that kind of thing. JD Vance's kids getting, bored at the event. There was that Melania's hat.
That seemed to be quite a moment.
You wanted to talk about the hat.
Boaters are back. If you know what a boater hat is.
It?
Look, I think there are certainly some women who can really carry off a boater. I thought, for my fashion critique, I thought she looked really lovely. But I've seen other women, like Sam Armitage is a mate of mine, she really rocks a boater.
I thought it looked a bit dystopian.
Okay. Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Because of her eyes being quite shadowy.
Yeah, and also it was a problem for Donald Trump because he tried to give her a kiss on the cheek and he couldn't get under the brim. Couldn't get in there. Let's get into the speech and the serious stuff.
True.
He started, Claire, you've got a quote that you wanted to pull out from the speech in your best Trump voice. Let's have it.
I'm not giving my best Trump voice.
I didn't think so.
I don't have a best Trump voice. I don't have any Trump voice.
I didn't think so.
This is the one to clock, and it is right from the top from his speech at the inauguration. The golden age of America begins now. From this day forward, our country will flourish and be respected again all over the world. We will be the envy of every nation. We will not allow ourselves to be taken advantage of any longer. During every single day of the Trump administration, I will very simply put America first.
You'll explain in a minute why you think that is the quote to clock. But I just wanted to mention that he also referenced the assassination attempt on him some months ago, saying, and this is another quote, but I think it's important to read my best Trump voice. No. Just a few months ago in a beautiful Pennsylvania field, an assassin's bullet ripped through my ear. I felt then and believe even more so now that my life was saved for a reason. I was saved by God to make America great again. A lot has been said about this. The New York Times described it as this martyr role he's playing, this saviour role. godlike.
Yeah, it's definitely a thing. And also, he wants to put the US flag on Mars.
There was that. But explain why you think we need to really clock those couple of things, I guess.
Look, I think pretty much everything that you then look at his agenda that he ran on and has promised to deliver in these first days of his presidency can come back to this sort of framework. If you're ever wondering in the next 4 years why he's doing something, I think it just comes back to these few basic sentences. So it's about protecting the US economy. It's about asserting his view of American prestige, whether that's domestically or in the world. Also drawing very hard lines around its international relations.
Yeah, and I think that's not just your view, of course. We've read widely and looked at the commentary, and that is what certainly, what people are saying. Then we get into what he went on to do next, which was sign a heap of executive orders. What is an executive order?
Yeah. So it feels like plenty of people have been talking about this all week and no one has sort of really explained what they actually are.
The only place I could find an explanation was the BBC.
Oh, there you go.
I was like,
the good old British public broadcaster. Here we go.
I just think there's an assumption.
I know. There absolutely is. So what it is a written order issued by the president to the federal government which does not require congressional approval. They can be subject to legal review, of course, because they have to sort of operate within the bounds of American law. But it is a way for presidents to overturn previous policies and to make their mark very quickly.
Very quickly. Trump certainly did that. A few notable ones we'll run through. You might have seen in the news include declaring there are only two genders, male and female, in the US.
That will become the official policy of his government. His view is, and he articulated this in his speech, it's to end the government policy of trying to socially engineer race and gender into every aspect of public and private life. He says we will forge a society that is colourblind and merit-based. What it'll essentially do is roll back protections that were extended by the Biden administration to transgender people. There's also rolling back of policies across organisations, whether they're private or public organisations, terminating diversity, equity, inclusion programs.
Mostly within the federal government, though, and this has cued a huge debate about the implications for people who do identify that way. From there, Claire, another one people might have picked up on is around border and immigration.
Yep. So he declared a national emergency at the border with Mexico. He started to wind back some of the policies from the Biden administration there too. So some say it could lead to mass deportations. That's definitely something that's being watched very closely in the US at the moment. There's also this end to an order that issues birthright citizenship in the United States. That's a measure that has already been blocked by lawmakers, but expect a lot more on that.
A lot more on that. So anyone born in the US is considered a citizen at birth. Trump's concern is that those who are arriving illegally into the US are then having children. He's saying, for example, individuals born in the United States are not entitled to automatic citizenship if the mother, for example, was in the country unlawfully and the father was not a citizen or lawful permanent resident. But as you say, this is being widely challenged. A quick Google of this is, I think it's a number of states, I want to say in the teens, that many states are already saying, absolutely not, this is not a thing, we will challenge it. So that'll be debated. Energy, a big part of the Trump agenda. So you'll remember the whole drill, baby, drill narrative. What Trump has done is declare a national energy emergency. Perhaps the thing that got the most attention was his attempt to withdraw federal government support for electric vehicles. There's a whole New York Times daily episode on that. If you want to go deeper on that, have a listen. Have you listened to that one yet?
I have, yeah.
I thought it was interesting because what I immediately thought to myself was, hold on a minute. Elon Musk owns Tesla.
Yep.
Elon Musk is Trump's best mate at the moment.
Yep.
How does that work? This podcast does explain that this measure will mainly affect legacy manufacturers who need help getting out of the old way of things and getting into the new way of things, which is EVs, whereas Tesla only does EVs. So they're likely to be less impacted than others. That episode goes deeper. It is worth a listen. Elon Musk does bring us to the tech bros, though. They were a big part of this inauguration story.
And to the memification of it all. We flagged also last week that there was this idea that you would have Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos and others all sitting together at the inauguration. When you look at the pictures, what Mark Zuckerberg was looking at. I'll let you find out.
I didn't know this, but he's been caught having a little... Well, I mean, it's hard not to look.
It's hard not to look.
Lauren Sanchez is Jeff Bezos' partner. She was wearing a bra
Yeah.
with a suit jacket on, and he had a look.
He was, yes, and smiled and sprung like he knew it was sprung.
Yeah.
That was one of those moments that did go a bit viral, particularly on the platforms that he owns. So that was a whole thing. It really was that showcase, and not just at the inauguration, but the events before and after the inauguration about who the donors are, exactly what they're looking to get out of the Trump administration.
And where power lies, I guess,
exactly.
When it comes to this new government. He also, as part of those executive orders, extended the lifeline for TikTok, so people will know there was a moment on Sunday where no one could access TikTok, and then it was back. That ban they've been granted an extension so they can try and find a US buyer or work it out or whatever. He withdrew the United States from the Paris Agreement, something we knew he would do. Perhaps the showstopper, though, Claire, was an executive order to pardon or commute the sentences of 1,500 people in connection with the Capitol riots on the 6th of January 2021.
He had promised to do that as he was campaigning. There was quite a campaign moment actually about a choir of those men who had been put behind bars for their role in those riots, singing the national anthem. It was one of the big moments of one of his first rallies. So, that he has followed through on that promise has definitely been a really big deal. About 250 of those are still in prison, but they've started to be released.
There's so much more. We just wanted to give you a really good recce because it has been a lot to keep up with this week. And I think our mission is to keep you informed. That is probably, if you saw the news coverage, probably what you mainly saw in an explanation of each of those things. Probably the only other thing to mention, I just realised before we go onto something else, is big global conflicts. So he has said to Vladimir Putin, let's try and put an end to this war. He said he could end the war in 24 hours. He's clearly not met that deadline.
Didn't meet that one. No, he did not meet that deadline. But when it comes to things, taxes, tariffs, sanctions, talking to Putin about what deals could be done there if there is peace, those things have started already.
Yeah, he's put pressure on him to say, end the war in Ukraine or else.
Maybe we can work something out.
Yeah. It's a big job to be president.
Oh, gosh, it really is.
A message now from HubSpot. Picture this, you're at a barbecue, someone asks you what you do as a marketer. You have to generate leads, create content, make your brand go viral. It's a lot. Thankfully, there's Breeze, HubSpot's suite of AI tools. Now you can turn one piece of content into all the assets you need. Find the best leads and beef up your reporting all in one place. Plus, you'll have way more fun explaining your job at the barbecue. Visit HubSpot.com/marketers to see how companies like yours are generating 110% more leads in just 12 months. Three other big news stories from the week. Probably, as we mentioned at the top, let's regroup on the ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. We left that in last weekly wrap as a bit of a TBC. We didn't really know what was going on, but it did begin on Sunday.
Yeah, it went right down to the wire. Israel's government had to go through a couple of process points to confirm their commitment. But on Sunday, around 90 Palestinian prisoners and detainees were freed from Israeli jails and into the occupied West Bank. The first 3 hostages taken from Israel in October 2023 were also released.
How they actually did that got quite a bit of attention. It is sort of really fascinating. They were brought in a Hamas vehicle to Soraya Square in Gaza City. It was chaos. They were moved to a Red Cross vehicle a few metres away. They were then taken to Israeli special forces at a point inside Gaza, about 5 kilometres away, then taken to a military base inside Israel where they were reunited with their families. It's a cliche, but emotional scenes. before being flown to hospital.
And by all accounts, that's how the future hostage releases will go as well, this sort of intricate dance between Hamas, the Red Cross and the Israeli military. So that's definitely worth clocking, and you'll see that unfold a few more times now if all things go to plan. As for the Palestinian detainees, most were women, some were teenagers. They were being held over less serious crimes. As it goes on, those released will include some who are accused or convicted of serious crimes. That includes organising suicide bombings. Israel, though, has insisted that no one who was involved in those 7 October attacks be freed.
Yeah, we'll see more hostage prisoner exchanges happening as soon as today, according to all reports. Also, lots of footage showing the devastation in Gaza as people started to return home, many finding their home ruined, of course, people pitching tents to sleep on property as the restoration begins, something that is going to take, of course, a very, very long time. Moving on to the issue of anti-Semitism, more alleged hate crimes being committed. Probably the most notable in Sydney was an arson attack on a childcare centre in Maroubra. It's in eastern suburbs. Sydney, that made international news, in fact.
Yeah, international headlines, particularly in America, they're following what's happening here very, very closely. So that was a non-religious daycare centre, and they think why maybe it was targeted was that there's a synagogue behind it and then a Jewish school. Locals reckon it could be a case of mistaken identity, essentially, that they were probably targeting those Jewish institutions, and for some reason they've targeted the childcare centre.
No one was, of course, there at the time. This happened during
very
the
early hours
of
Tuesday morning. So what it means is that since late November there have been 6 major anti-Semitic attacks in Sydney, 1 in Melbourne. 5 of them have involved arson.
Yeah, I mean, a childcare centre burning is quite the thing to see happen. On Tuesday, a snap National Cabinet meeting was called. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has been under pressure from the coalition to do that for quite some time.
Yeah, he certainly has been. And the way it's been reported is that Albanese on Monday was like, absolutely not. We're not doing National Cabinet. We're doing everything that we need to do. But those images coming from that incident with the childcare centre burning down seem to prompt him to call that meeting. His position changed literally overnight. He and Premier Chris Minns also visited the site on Tuesday morning.
Yeah, Chris Minns was furious. He called those responsible animals. And so the question goes to, well, who's doing this stuff? Federal Police Commissioner Reece Kershaw, who I'm sure is a name we're going to hear a lot more ongoing, said all lines of inquiry were open, including whether overseas actors were behind these attacks. That certainly, my ears pricked up going, what does that mean?
What does that mean? Yeah, it caused a real stir, but it also prompted a clarification. So on Wednesday, what he added is that police are looking at who is paying those criminals, where those people are, whether they're in Australia or offshore, and what their motivation is. Prime Minister Albanese also added to that because it was a big deal, that comment, and the media coverage was really laser focused on it on Wednesday morning. What Albanese said is that paid actors, rather than people motivated by anti-Jewish ideology, are believed to be behind the attacks.
We don't know a whole lot more, but that is a pretty big development. I guess I for one never considered that to be an option,
be a possibility.
But here we are. The coalition, of course, is not happy about any of it. They have so many questions that they've asked around, what do you mean? What's going on? How dangerous is this? All of those things. Mark Dreyfus is our Attorney General, another name to just sort of, in this conversation, just to know about. He was calling for a lowering of the temperature of the political debate about this.
He says that it just fuels the violence and division in our country.
Yeah, and in a moment after we do the next story, we'll just talk about what we talked to the Prime Minister about, because we actually asked him a little bit about his response to anti-Semitism in Australia in our conversation with him this week, Claire. But first of all, the polls. I feel awkward.
I know. Don't feel too dirty about it.
I feel like
we won't be doing this a lot because we don't do this a lot.
It doesn't sit well. I just think, the polls come and go. And are they right? Are they wrong?
I know. And look, we'll forgive you too if you're listening and you don't follow the polls day in, day out. That's a perfectly normal thing not to be doing.
Yeah.
But there was one that did send shockwaves through political circles this week, just to use the cliches as we're going. The latest Resolve Political Monitor was out this week, so it's the one that Nine promotes and commissions. So the Sydney Morning Herald, The Age, the Financial Review, Nine News. What it showed is the coalition is doing pretty well.
Yeah, against Labor. The key takeout is Peter Dutton gained a significant lead over Anthony Albanese as preferred Prime Minister. Dutton's on 39% to Albanese's 34%. The shift there is that they were tied on that key question at the end of last year. So what this poll says is that people are frustrated about the cost of living.
Frustrated about the cost of living, and anyone who really follows this closely says that key metric, preferred PM, Dutton, when you follow the trend, is picking up. So, and Albanese is coming off. Whether that informs your view about how you vote, who you want to be the Prime Minister, is a whole other thing.
Right. Yeah.
The other thing to note is that the poll shows that Labor's primary vote is holding steady at 27%. The Coalition's pretty steady at 38%. It's very, very hard for the major parties to win government if they're in the 20s.
And that's why you'll hear the experts talking about minority government being a prospect in the upcoming election. And it's something that we asked Albanese about actually when we spoke to him was, like, people aren't voting for major parties anymore. How do you appeal to people that are voting for the other parties, are voting for an independent, are voting for the Greens, are voting for One Nation, are voting all different ways? How are you going to combat that? So just another sort of teaser, I guess, of what we sort of questioned him about.
Yeah, and he was putting up a pretty strong case for Labor values. A lot of the conversation was around what he and the Labor Party stand for as a political identity in their own right when you compare them, particularly to the Greens. He talked a lot about the Greens because, of course, that's always the question, are they pretty much the same and what's the difference? For Labor, they need people to vote Labor rather than vote for the Greens thinking they're voting for Labor. So we talked quite a bit about that.
Yeah, we did. But we also just had a nice chat. For anyone who hasn't listened, the feedback from our audience seems to be, I learn a lot. I enjoyed the conversation. I enjoyed that it wasn't an interrogation, but people thought we weren't too soft, I guess.
And wasn't that a relief? Because we haven't
done
interviewed
it
a politician before,
let alone
the Prime Minister. We're starting at the top.
So we really love you to have a listen to that if you haven't already. It'll be there for you to listen to any time, of course, and we do expect to have Peter Dutton on in the coming weeks and months.
Foreseeable, yep.
In what's coming up, it's the Australia Day long weekend this weekend. Plenty going on. Australian of the Year awards, of course.
Yep, and not just the Australian of the Year. There's also the Local Hero, Young Australian of the Year. There's the Senior Australian of the Year. Those are announced tonight. And we're recording before that, so we can't tell you the winners.
No, we'll probably talk about it next week, though. Sunday is Australia Day. Once again, debate around changing the date. Interesting on polling, that Resolve polling again has some exclusive numbers out yesterday. They showed support for keeping the date has jumped a lot over the past 2 years from 47% to 61%. It's incredible.
Keep it. 61% saying
just leave it as it is.
Yeah,
so
right.
There you go. There's a little, just because we've got a polling theme today, let's just stick with it. Monday is a public holiday, given Australia Day falls on a Sunday. Monday night, the Big Bash final.
Big Bash final, Hobart Hurricanes versus the Sydney Thunder or the Sydney Sixers. As we're recording it, we're not really sure.
No, but you'll know by now if you're really interested. Give it a Google.
That's a Friday night thing.
Tennis, De Minaur is out, so I've lost interest.
I kind of clocked off too. I have to say. So we're probably not the people to have any authenticity around talking about it any further.
No, I don't know. Like the women will play tonight in the
I'll watch
final.
the finals.
Yeah, it's Sabalenka and Keys tonight. That'll be really interesting. And then we're not really sure who's in the men's final yet. But we know plenty of people care a lot about the tennis. It's looked like a lot of fun. I wish I went.
Yes. Lots of talk from the players too about the crowds and the media coverage. That's a whole other rabbit hole we won't go down. But yeah, it always has its own flavour, each Australian Open, and this one definitely has had its own as well.
Every time I turn it on, I'm like, God, I've been
so
before
good.
and I really want to go again. School starts next week for a few states, Claire, as we mentioned, and expect antisemitism will continue to be a huge story. It's the 80-year anniversary of the liberation of the Auschwitz concentration inauguration camp, Penny Wong and Mark Dreyfus, our Attorney General that we mentioned, are travelling to Poland to attend the ceremony. Squiz recommends, apart from please listen to our interview with the Prime Minister, I was going to say that I watched Squid Game finally, the first season, and I'm surprised at how much I enjoyed it. And I know some people will be seeing all the coverage about the second season and wondering, have I missed this? Should I go back and watch season 1?
Yeah.
I really liked it. Well,
look, you continue to sort of stump me when it comes to these things with your contradictions.
I know, because it's so gory and grisly and grim, but it's like a commentary on humanity.
Yes.
Which I do like that kind of thing.
We've just talked about concentration camps and state control and all sorts of, all sorts of things happening in the world. So, yes, it definitely does tap into a lot of those sorts of things.
I get it now. So if anyone's thinking, Not sure, I don't know if that helps.
I really enjoyed, in that perverse, weird way of enjoying something like that. I thought it was so clever.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Okay. Squid Game, away you go. I am recommending a Vanity Fair magazine cover story, which went up this time last week. It's about Harry and Meghan and where they are at the moment. Now, if you don't care about Harry and Meghan, that's fine.
I did read it.
You did read it?
Yeah,
okay.
I did read it. I read the bits that you told me to read.
Okay.
Because I don't really care.
Yeah.
But you were insistent. And it is quite a read.
Yeah, and I didn't read it. I actually listened to the audio version as I was walking the dog, and I think I said to you, I had to stop a couple of times because I was laughing so hard at the first sort of 20, 25 minutes or so of the listen. It's about a 55-minute listen in total. The first bit is about their media publishing efforts, which of course naturally appeals to us. We're very interested in it. But the stories about their podcasting particularly was just lols all round.
And what Claire's referring to is that they signed a deal with Spotify. It took a long time for them to actually make a podcast, years.
A podcast.
Yeah. And that it goes through why, because they just had no ideas.
Yeah.
So it's easy. It is an interesting read.
And the line from it that I think will stick, and it sort of articulates for me what I've not been able to articulate for myself around the tension with the troubles that they're finding in this sort of new life, is that the thing that they're running away from is the thing that makes them interesting.
Interesting. There you go. It's deep. Should we finish it there?
Yeah.
There you go. All those links are in your show notes, always, to our recommendations. A bit of a longer episode today, but we thought it was a week worthy of it. So enjoy your weekend. It's a long one. You've got probably a little bit more time, and we'll be back next week.